for all the match strikers.
This is Spiritual Pyro.
Because that's what we do is we dance on our
We
podcast.
dance. No one can see us, but
we dance it out.
We're often dancing. Hi. Are you ready for Deconstruction Part 2? Oh my goodness.
We were born for this one.
Deconstruction feels like such a scary word. It feels like such a loaded word, even though I know it's one we've been like, it's been part of our vocabulary for so many years at this point, but it is, I think, important to recognize the topic is big. It's like in the worlds that we're coming from, deconstruction is a big word, and it can mean a lot of different things to different people.
Yeah.
So
as we say, it's loaded. It's so loaded. But also, I want to recognize the fact that we were kind of doing this in our lives and in our faith systems before there was this actual term, that was colloquial and, kind of commonplace. So I think there was a sense of like, oh, is that what I've been doing all this time, is deconstructing? Oh, okay. So that kind of, I think we were kind of, our journey kind of predates that term, at least in the general sense.
We're like old school. We're like the OG.
Yeah. OGs.
I'm pretty sure people have been deconstructing for a lot longer than we have. But
Pretty sure. But at the same time, we often talk about how we've kind of always been deconstructing. Like, I can't really think of a time when I wasn't questioning or unraveling or, dissecting, beliefs. Like, it was kind of always what I was doing. So there's not really like an initiation point or like an entry point. It was just kind of always there for me. What about you?
Yeah, I think, a lot of what I was speaking to even last week was that the way I came to faith was real, or to the specific religion that I came to, was born of a very strong part of me that always felt connected to something bigger than myself, that always easily accepted the idea of there being a spiritual life or spiritual world, or somehow that we're connected to something spiritual. And what I was told was that his name is Jesus, and that made sense to me in all the ways I needed it to. And that worked. That was a system that I walked in for a long time and really didn't see any problem with it or any concerns. It worked as a name for something that existed before I even found it within me. So yeah, I think that when I think about deconstruction for myself, it's really it has felt like more of a parting of alignment. So I've been on the same sort of direction of like moving toward whatever the word is we want to use for it, love, source, God, bigger than ourselves, that idea. And for a while, it felt like Christianity was like parallel line, and that it worked. And then deconstruction for me started when suddenly they weren't parallel lines anymore. And I had to start digging into like, what about that and why, and what does that mean? And started having to examine the faith that I'd chosen on a level that I really hadn't before. And if that to me would be like, what if there was like a point in time when I'm like, this is what deconstruction looks like for me, that would be how I would describe it.
That's so interesting honestly, because we're having this specific piece of this conversation for the first time right now. So the imagery that you just provided about how you've always been moving forward toward something, and this faith system was part of that and then wasn't part of that based on whether or not it was in alignment with what you were already pursuing. That is actually a really beautiful and honestly helpful way to think about this whole process. Because if I plug in my desire to find out what's true about the world, and if I, and I think everybody can plug in that thing that religion was doing for them in whatever sense. And if you plug that in as the variable, right? And if I'm just still pursuing what's true about the world, and Christianity in its different forms and the different systems that I was a part of was just kind of part of that journey, but I'm still headed in the same direction. It's just that's no longer in alignment. So it's almost like I moved through that and then continued on after that. I'm still pursuing what's true about the world. It's just no longer a dichotomy or a binary. It's so much bigger and broader and more expansive than I ever knew. But before, I thought it was black or white, right or wrong, this or that, in or out. But I've moved through that into this much bigger, much more expansive and inclusive understanding of what's true about the world, and that it's not just one thing or another. It's so many beautiful things are true about the world. And how mind-blowing that is. So thank you for that. Actually, that is just that's just honestly like a helpful little tool. I'm just going to put it in my pocket.
I love that. Put it in your pocket. There's what that way of thinking does too, is it allows us to, it removes any like tension or frustration or anger, or it to me, it alleviates, it allows it to be a part of the story and not necessarily to come at it with angst or, I don't know, that it can just be a part of the story, of our story that existed and that walked with us for a time in a way that served some really beautiful pieces. It helped me grow in a lot of ways. I don't have a resentment for the faith that I experienced for the time I did. I think the tension for me became when those points of separation sort of began, of like the begging the question of like, why is this not feeling like it's fitting anymore? That's when the tension began for me within my place within the faith that I was in. It really was the beginning of the separation. And now I can look at it and go, I recognize that it was all part of the process. But when you're in it and you're experiencing really those first moments when your faith isn't matching what you believe to be true, and then what do you do with the gap of that? What do you do with the tension of that? Because usually you're going to find yourself already pretty heavily invested in a faith community within a religion you're talking years potentially at that point of investment in all kinds of ways into that faith. And then suddenly now it doesn't fit anymore. Like, what do you do?
We can hold on to a measure of the beauty that we did experience and the way that those, worldviews and faith systems helped us grow. Also, I think it's important to acknowledge that most of the time, the fondness that we are able to look back with is because those were points in our journey where we had not really dug into the history. We had not really dug into the origin stories of the things that we were a part of. And once we started to do that, that's where a lot of that alignment started to deviate. So the fondness that we can look back with is often when we just didn't know a lot about the history of our traditions. Ooh. So I think that there's a lot there. And, wherever we entered into those places of whether it was research or learning from other groups of people and different perspectives about, the damage done. It's not like the religion or the faith system just changed all of a sudden recently and we were no longer in alignment with it. It's that we actually started getting more educated. And the more that we did that, the more that we started looking with some intellectual honesty at where, what has been done in the name of this God throughout history. Once we've started looking at that with a little bit more clarity and, willing to look at some really difficult things, we started being able to trace those lines of harm into our current spaces. So I want to acknowledge that it's not just, oh, back, it was just better back then. No, it was just that we didn't know. We didn't know what we had been a part of for so long.
Right. Yeah.
There's a grief in that.
There's definitely a grief in that, which I would love for us to explore at some point too. It's the moment we have to acknowledge that we were participating in perpetuating a system that historically causes a lot of harm. And just because we didn't know it doesn't mean that we don't have to own our place within that.
Exactly.
Right? And it is our responsibility to educate ourselves. And then once we know, we can't unknow.
Right. And that goes way beyond current headlines. That goes way beyond what's happened over the last 8 years. Like, that goes way beyond current conversations about what Christianity looks like today or what the church looks like today. These are also questions about origins, so it's and everything in between. So I think that's a much bigger chunk to bite off than we have time for in this conversation. But it's important for us to have that kind of as the foundation as we're talking about these stories. And honestly, it really is the foundation. I mean, think about you and I. We both kind of deviated from the path that we had been on and found ourselves in the same space at the same time.
We have a history of doing that, don't we? We've done that a few times.
We do.
Right? Because I'm thinking, let's see, I think we left off at like age 18, in our in part one. And so, I mean, moving forward from there, for me, that was, I was set to go to a art school out in California. And last minute, the summer before, I decided to go to a small Christian college in California because I really felt that God was calling me to go there. And now I look at that and I go, sweet baby girl, but at the time I was so sure that I was doing the right thing. And so ended up at this Christian college, and that campus is where you and I met for the first time. That is where the story begins for us. So
that's
wild.
Where we first we were in cahoots for the first time.
That was the beginning of our cahoots. I love that for us.
Okay, but what's interesting is how you were on this one path and then you jumped ship and came to that college. I was on a different path. I was finishing my education degree. And then I will never forget, the senior pastor of our church at the time was like, hey, I've got this opportunity. What do you think about it? And it was like, what do you think about going to live in a college dorm and work with college students? And I was like, that sounds totally fun. And at the time, Eric was like, what? That was like nothing that we had ever talked about or planned on. And that was actually his alma mater. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great time. We should totally go do it. And this was like months before. And we packed up the U-Haul and drove to California and moved into a college dorm. Like, what?
And to be young, right?
I know. But I mean, it's the truth though, because all I've ever been looking for is what's true about the world and a big adventure, and I think anybody, again, for better or for worse, anybody who's ever looked at my decision making and been like, ooh, I don't know about that, I've been searching for that big adventure forever. And really believing that whatever God is surely the biggest adventure of them all, right? That's what I really wanted to be true. So I've got this opportunity all my friends are like buying their first house and like, starting their careers. And I'm like, I'm going to go live in a college dorm and work with college kids. And they're just like, oh, okay. Like, sweet baby girl. Okay. Yeah, they were. There was a lot. I'm surprised there was not an intervention. But then we met.
I mean, who knows if we ever would have if you hadn't made that choice.
I know. Well, you were the girl on the third floor who always had a massive canvas in process. You were always painting something. And that was my intro to you, was you were this incredible fine artist who like also just happened to be going to school, you know?
Yeah. I'm thinking, was it the Numa? Was I like passing you the Numa?
Yeah.
Which at the time, I don't even know how to explain it now. It feels like so old now. But at the time it was they're like these mini teachings on DVD.
It was revolutionary.
It was revolutionary at the time.
When Rob Bell started doing these little micro sermons on DVD. And do you remember how like the camera would follow him as he walked? And that was like the thing, right? Is that he was like walking with the camera. It was unlike anything anybody else was doing. And you showed up at my apartment door and you were like, I've got something you're going to love. And you handed me these turquoise discs and you were like, this is super in the vault. You can't share these. I was like, oh my gosh. I
love her. Let's be friends.
I know. I was like, I'm getting a sneak peek at something really big. I don't even know who this is or what it's about, but I want it. I want in, you know? So that was literally our first Kahoot.
It was. We've been trouble for a long time. Yeah.
Anyway,
college days.
That was my intro, though, to this understanding that you could be a professional Christian. It was like, wait a second. You mean I can get paid to do things I'm already doing? Okay. It was like, all right. It was fun, you know, like all of the programming and all of the relationship building and all that kind of stuff that I already loved. But it was kind of my intro into this industry side of belief where people were making careers out of it. So I was like, oh, I guess this is normal. I guess this is a normal thing that people are, you know, they're just a career Christian. And I was kind of like, I feel like if anybody could be a career Christian, I could. Like, okay.
Career Christian. Yeah, like a professional Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
what a pastor is.
It is what a pastor is. I agree with you though. Before I went to that college, really, I hadn't been exposed to how many different options career-wise there were, to like how many different ways you could be a professional Christian. And I had no idea really what went into the behind-the-scenes element of a church and of ministry at that time. And that was eye-opening, even to the extent of a machine that in many ways the church can be. There's so much that goes into your Sunday morning, service that you don't see weekly.
The women's Bible study, the church camp, you know, all of it.
Well, like the marketing department. I mean, I'm talking like all the things that go into it, and that actually end up leading to what happens on a Sunday.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me what you think about this, because after I worked at the college, I went on to then work in women's ministry for a big mega church. And I remember before I took that job, a friend of mine who had been in vocational ministry for a long time, I remember her saying, she was like, okay. She was like, I know you're considering this. She's like, just know that once you work for a church, you will never just sit in the pews ever again. You will never be able to unsee what she's like. Once you've seen behind the curtain and you know how it all works, you will never be able to unsee that and just be a churchgoer ever again. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised by that, you know, whatever. I don't think I could have possibly prepared myself for how true that statement would be. So I'm just curious, like, how that hits you, like, just that same idea.
Yeah, it's sort of like what they say, like, if you like the restaurant, don't go in the kitchen. Like, it's better just to not know and just sort of be blissfully unaware. Although, again, that tends to be my problem, is I can't not ask the questions. I want to know. I want it to be if it's good, I want it to be good all the way through, not just good because they're showing us the shiny part, right? It's like meeting the wizard. Yeah. Like, I have to meet the wizard. I need to know.
See the wizard.
And that has not it doesn't always go so well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it is difficult because, again, it's just another off-ramp of alignment with our faith and ourself. Yeah. It's another place to explore. And I'm thinking about a time several years ago now at this point when my husband was working at a church and I had an art gallery. We were living in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I would teach these creative workshops. I was in like a co-op with other artists. We would do like monthly shows. It was so cool and so fun. And I just had the best time. And
so you.
Yeah, I felt very me. And it was one of the first times, I think, in my dynamic, like even like within my marriage, where I was practicing some more independence outside of the church world, which was, Steve's a pastor. And so his church world tends to be pretty all encompassing when you're married to a pastor. The pastor's wife title is pretty broad. And this little space that I'd carved out for myself was independent of that world, which I found I really thrived in and was able to bring even like back some parts of myself into the equation. You talk about like me being in college and painting all the time. And like there was a lot of that I stepped away from in such earnest effort to be a really good pastor's wife and be super involved in the church and to be, all those things. And so, having this space was sort of a reminder. It was one of those little flares of like, ooh, there she is.
Like, there she is.
There she is. Yeah.
There she is. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. But, it was not without challenge, because this would be probably like if there was one, if I'm looking at my journey of life as a pathway, and this is one of those places where the parallel lines of my faith didn't match up. And it really was that I'd built this beautiful community and I'd built this beautiful work, and it wasn't under the banner of the church. It wasn't labeled Christian. It didn't carry the church's name. It wasn't, done on church campus.
Yep.
And that ended up being I hate to say problematic, but concerning for some, because it's like, well, if you're doing this work, why wouldn't you do it for the church? Why wouldn't you do that for the church? And it really made me have to explore for myself, like, what is church and not church? Because the conversations I'm having in these creative workshops, the growth that I'm seeing happen, like the dynamics of connection and community and friendship, like all of that feels a lot like church. And so really, what are we talking about when we say church? Is it the label? Is it the space? Is it the power, the control, the responsibility? And is that something I want to be handing off to someone else when it's something that I've built? And honestly, a lot of the people that came through my gallery doors would not have felt safe to go through the church doors.
Yep.
Like, and those are my people. Like that's where I wanted to be. And it was really one of the first times that I had to explore, like, how far can my faith take me if I'm continuing to kind of almost like, there she is, right? Take back some pieces of myself or rediscover them. Now what do I do when some pieces aren't quite fitting within the church world?
Yeah. And you're finding yourself saying things like, people that I care about wouldn't feel safe. Like that, there's sometimes that we have those moments where it's like, you can't unhear it. You can't unthink it. It's like a point of no return. When you admit, it's like, well, what does that mean? So how far can my faith go if people I care about are not safe enough to engage it? Like, oof.
Well, and like it begs the question, why don't they feel safe?
Yeah.
Right. And then you start pulling that thread, and that makes things complicated pretty quickly.
Right. Right. You know, I think so much of our ability to be intellectually honest about what we believe has to do with proximity. So when we're never outside of that system, it's really difficult to get enough distance or get enough perspective to start telling ourselves the truth about our own lives, right? But then we get a little bit of space, or we have a pocket of space, like your studio, where we can exist. Or for me, like it literally took moving overseas for me to have enough distance from the community that I was a part of, from the community that I had built. Like it took me actually being on the other side of the world to feel safe enough to tell myself the truth about my own life. And I will never forget the very first time we went and visited Thailand. It was kind of like a scouting trip. And I remember we were taken to the big Buddhist temple that's on the top of the mountain in the city that we were, considering moving to. And the woman who had given us this tour, she was, a white expat Christian woman, and part of the organization that we were, being courted by. And we got to the center of the temple. And in the center of the Buddhist temple is a tiled, it's open air, but it's a tiled space, and you take off your shoes and you have to have a shoulder covering out of respect. And you walk in, and there's a massive golden chedi, which is a big tower that's in the very center of this central temple space. And then there's this square that goes around the outside of the chedi. And the devout Buddhists walk their prayer 7 times around that chedi. There's an altar where there's offerings made, flowers, money, beverages, candles, like anything that's an offering can be placed here. And we're standing in awe and in reverence, honoring this space that is different from any space we've ever been in, and really just taking it all in. And I remember I have a photo that I took looking up at the very pinnacle of this gold tower. And I remember at that moment that I was taking the photo, she said, just really casually, she goes, I think we're all just trying to explain something bigger than ourselves. And that was this moment where I felt like the floor was cracking underneath me. Like she said this quiet part out loud. She was in the same communities that I'm a part of. She's in the same, spaces that I'm familiar with. And yet she had the room within herself to admit that maybe there's not just one black and white, right or wrong, in or out truth about the world. Maybe all any of us are doing is trying to explain something bigger than ourselves. And that makes me think about you talking about yourself as a young girl, and really you just always knew there was something bigger. And so here I was as a grown-ass woman who'd always kind of been deconstructing on some level, but really needed some distance to be able to get really honest with myself. And it was just this wave of permission that just flooded. If like this middle space of this temple in my mind, in my imagination, just flooded with permission to believe that we are all just trying to do the same thing. We are all just trying to explain something bigger than ourselves. Every religion for all of human history has always been just trying to explain something bigger than ourselves. And when I allowed myself to really receive that, I honestly, Sarah, I don't know if anything else has ever felt more true.
Wow.
Like that resonated deep in my soul in a way that was not about a religion. It was not about any one group of people at any one group of, or at any one point in history. It was just all of a sudden this hierarchy of belief that I had been handed, it just leveled the playing field. And all of a sudden, all of us are exactly the same. Forever and ever. And that was like the cracks in the foundation of what I had always believed. I mean, there was no way to go back after that moment.
Wow. Do you remember how you felt? Like, did that feel scary to kind of have that realization, or did it feel liberating? Did you feel like free? Did you feel terrified? What did you?
So liberating.
Yeah.
It felt like taking a big gasp of air after holding my breath for a really long time. It was like
almost like something you already knew was true. You were allowed to say or believe. Like it had been there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was it was how she said it. It was the moment she said it in. It was the distance I had from anything else that I had ever felt beholden to. Like, it was all of it. It was just this one tiny little moment that cracked my world wide open.
Wow. That's incredible. I have a moment similar that I'm thinking of, and where in the same way as the revelation, oh my gosh, as the revelation sort of hit me, it felt liberating. If I had thought about it before experiencing it, the idea of it felt terrifying. Like, it feels like, oh, we can't, we shouldn't. And it was back in Arizona. This was after leaving the church in Illinois, after my life fell apart. And I used to walk the desert trails to try to put myself back together. And I had this very specific memory of hiking this mountain near my place, getting to the top. And the whole way up, I intentionally didn't listen to music or a podcast or anything. I just was like quiet and listening and letting things brew and stir. And I remember having enough distance from our experience to be able to feel more settled. Like, I didn't feel like I was in like a triggered or high trauma moment. I was just finding those pieces of myself out along the trail, and getting to the top of that mountain and just sitting on this boulder and having the dangerous thought that this feels like church too. Like, what if this can be church too? And within that, not even just like outside the four walls of the Christian church, but this very nearness of who I call God. It was so near and so crystal clear and so prevalent in everything, in the air, in the poppies, in the cacti, and the jackrabbits, like so crystal clear and near to me in a way that I had actually felt really distanced from for all those years that I spent trying to find God and make it fit within the walls of a church. And it was one of those first moments for me where the second that I thought it, I felt like the biggest relief. Like, it just felt like, oh, that has always been true for me. And I spent a lot of time and energy trying to force it to either not be or to find it within a structure and a system where I really didn't find it. And I expected I would feel guilty, or that would feel scandalous, or that I would be like, but all I felt was relief and alignment. I just felt like that feels true. That feels right. And it feels like a returning of a part of me that now that I know, again, there's no going back. Like, she's coming with me,
Oh, a returning. I keep thinking from something you said earlier, that first little bit about moving through something and it's no longer in alignment, but it's kind of what you've always been pursuing. The idea of our becoming, and how we're always becoming, we're always returning, we're always evolving, we're always changing. Like, that's the point. Like, that is what it means to be human. And so to ascribe to a faith system where the goal is to achieve or to get to a certain spot and then white knuckle it and hold on to it and never let go, or else you're backsliding, or else you're being, unfaithful or something like that. The goal is to stay. You get to that point and then the goal is to stay. Once you figure out what is true and once you convert or once you believe or whatever, then the goal is to never let go. And that is so contrary to everything else about us as human beings, that we are always becoming, we are always changing, always evolving. And that is so much more in alignment with our true nature and some might say our design than any sort of stagnance. Anything that resists change either breaks or dies off, right? Like when we think about biodiversity, right? The future of a species depends upon the micro and the macro evolution over time, small changes over time. That is, and a variety of species and a variety of genetics. So I just think it's so interesting with the more diverse a population or a cross-section is, the more that we allow ourselves to become and evolve, the more longevity we have, the more sustainability we have. It's so beautiful. And everything, though, that we are trying to do within a religious system is so rigid and so stagnant and so finite and so hard, right? So anyway, and in terms of our language and how we're feeling and how we're talking about these things, there's these moments of rigidity and then there's these moments of release. And I'm like a professional white knuckler, like I think that my downfall has always been my death grip on whether it's certainty or my plan for something or how I thought something would go or whatever. That death grip is always to my detriment. It's always when I've been able to release that and hold something loosely with open hands or palms up that I've been able to survive something. So I just love that our language about it is like really mirroring that as feeling deeply true about the world and about ourselves.
Yeah. Well, something that you said makes me think of a story that you actually do include in Skies, the good father part of the story. You think about talk about deconstruction and when you said that, I thought, it makes me think of that moment that you had, because there was something interesting, and I'd love for you to tell it if you're comfortable with that. But there's the micro and the macro. There's the internal and the external. And I just think that specific experience that you had felt like both at the same time, which feels really powerful.
Yeah. Well, and before I tell that story, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you were just talking about is part of one of your chapters, right? And when you're talking about that climb up to the top and that realization.
Yeah. That's in Super Bloom.
Yeah. So I feel like, so much of Skies is these little moments too. Good Father, again, another story from Thailand is I had the opportunity to go to a conference it was an anti-trafficking conference, and a friend of mine was speaking there for the first time, and a bunch of us went to support her and to be a part of, the weekend. And it was really, really exciting. A lot of people in the community that I was a part of went to conferences on a regular basis. I never did. That wasn't a part of my purpose there or experience. So this felt like a really big honor to be able to go to this conference and participate in the broader sector in this way. And it was at the beginning of the conference, and we had found a row that fit all of our group that was there. And the lights went down, and all of a sudden there was this very familiar atmosphere created where the lights went down and the words on the screen went up and the people on the stage started playing music and everyone started to sing. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I thought we were at a conference, but I think we're at church. This feels a lot like a mega church service, I didn't get that memo. I thought and then I started to kind of feel pretty naive because, really the people that were hosting the conference were a faith-based organization. And it was just this perpetual crossover between the professional and the religious. And I had been thinking that we were at a professional conference, but and that was true. But the religious component was much more significant than I had understood. So everyone starts singing. And it was a song I recognized from the moment that it started. And it was Good, Good Father. And if anybody has an evangelical background, you know exactly, you know that song. Yeah, you know that song. You're singing it right now in your head. And I remember feeling really awkward because the words are on the screen and I just couldn't sing it. I've sung that song a million times. I could not sing it in that moment. And I felt as if surely there must be this massive spotlight on me, because in my mind, I was asking myself some questions that I had never given myself permission to ask. And it was only in that moment when confronted with the lyrics of that song. So Good, Good Father, over and over again. And I was thinking to myself, we are all here at this conference talking about a really difficult and often horrific problem in the world. And a good, good father would do something about it. So all of a sudden, I had this like, wait a second, what am I saying? What am I thinking here? Like, what are the ramifications of this thought, you know? And I started to think to myself, like, wait a second, like a good, good father doesn't just wait for somebody else to handle the problem. A good, good father doesn't turn away when his children are being abused and harmed and violated. A good, good father. It was just the ideas and the questions just kept coming. And it was like, well, what does it mean to be a good, good father? What does that mean? What does that look like? And even, it wasn't even about answering that question, but it was about allowing myself, daring to allow myself to ask, is this God that I've been handed even good? If they are good, wouldn't they intervene? So and all of these questions that honestly, from an apologetics perspective, there's always an answer. There's always an answer. I know all the answers. I know all the bullet points. So this isn't about theology. This is about my soul actually having room to question. And so, but here's the interesting part is that I was thinking to myself, surely there's a spotlight on me. Surely everybody in this room can tell that I'm like having like an existential crisis over here in the third row and I'm not singing, and everybody must know. And surely somebody in like, you know, red jackets or, you know, whatever, they're going to come and escort me out by the elbow. You know, like I just was feeling so self-conscious because I could not sing the song. And I look down my row and I look at all of my beautiful friends. Nobody is singing.
Wow.
And I was like, wait a second, that's weird. How come nobody's singing? And it wasn't until later on that I like said something about it. I was like, you guys, I couldn't sing that song. And I was just kind of like nervous to bring it up. And we had this really big, beautiful conversation about, and everybody from their own vantage points and for their own reasons and in their own ways and coming to their own conclusions and all that. But it was this beautiful conversation about asking questions we've never allowed ourselves to ask before. Wow. That was another moment that I was like, it wasn't about coming to an answer about the nature of God or anything like that. It was about being honest with myself that I could even wonder about the nature of God.
Yeah, it's those moments where it's like, am I even allowed to think this? Am I even allowed to ask that question? Am I even allowed to shift this the way I look at this or topic or whatever it is? Like something bad's going to happen now. Or like you said, someone's going to escort me out. Clearly they can tell. Like I've
someone's going to know.
Switched something up.
Someone's going to know. Yeah. But I think really the thing that I came to at the end of it, if anything, was what if God isn't who they said he was? And that means a lot of different things to me, right? Because a lot of that is liberating. A lot of that is beautiful and positive if God is not who they said he was, right? Like, if God's not even a he, if God's not, you know, like it allowed me a kind of another starting point. Because again, kind of always been deconstructing, but here was another layer that I had never looked at. And it took that moment, again, it was just that song and that moment at that conference on that topic, for me to be like, wait a minute, what if God isn't what I have been handed?
Yeah.
What if?
I think those moments, like I have a few of those myself when I look back at the deconstruction process of my faith. And I tried so hard not to deconstruct. Like I tried so hard to not ask questions like that or pay too close attention to the songs we were singing or the verse that was being read or the message being given from stage. If I just didn't listen close enough, I could, and if I just squinted just so, if I just didn't go to that meeting, if I just, then maybe I could make it, and because I tried so hard, because to allow myself to deconstruct, the implications of that within my life felt like an implosion of my life because it's so intertwined. Having a spouse that works at a church, having so much of our community and friendship built within church, having so much of my own identity and meaning and purpose built within the church, you start pulling those threads and everything, it feels like everything starts to unravel. And that is terrifying. That's really terrifying. And it for me, it kept me within an incongruent system, a system that was not in alignment with me for a lot longer than was good for me. And it really kept me from that natural growth that you were describing earlier, like even just within my own humanity, within my own femininity, within my own spirituality. I was stunted because I was trying so desperately hard to not deconstruct. But it was already happening. I think deconstruction and evolution are very similar, if not the same. That what we look at as like a tearing down, a falling apart, a leaving is really just growing. It's a
becoming.
It's the becoming. It's inevitable. Becoming is inevitable as long as we're alive.
It is. When you talk about like how many things are riding on not deconstructing, like that is so true, I think, for so many of us, because if we're doing it right, and air quotes, if we're doing it right, then all of life is all for Jesus. I mean, I had that t-shirt, right? That was like one of my church shirts. If all of life is all for Jesus, then every single part of your life is woven into what you believe, and what you believe is woven into every single part of your life. So there is not any space in your life that is safe from the unraveling, So, and that's a big gamble. That's a big gamble to start pulling on those threads. So I think you and I can recognize that, so many of the responses that we get and so much of the people who reach out to us understand that there's a cost, that it costs us to tell the truth about our own lives, to pull those threads, to allow ourselves to become. That's not just a pretty phrase. Like becoming is hard, it's hard work. And also I think it gives us so much compassion, not only for our younger selves, and the mistakes that we made along the way, but also for people who are maybe just beginning that journey, that it's long and not without really difficult spaces, and that there's no part of our lives that go untouched by that. So, it is so beautiful, and it's inevitable, and it is also some of the hardest work that we'll ever do.
Yeah. I think self-compassion and compassion for others is such a beautiful way to think about it. Again, it allows it to be expansive. It allows everyone's process to be different. And becoming doesn't always mean abandoning your faith, right? Lots of people find beautiful belonging within themselves, within a healthy faith system. It's the allowing ourselves to tell the truth about ourselves, about our own journey, about our own life, and allowing some room for that without it needing to threaten those around us or tear everything down. To consider the possibility that growth and deconstruction don't have to be negative things, that they can be hard and painful, because growing is pain. There's growing pains. Yep. But that it's not actually a tragedy, that it's not actually something to be terrified of, right? Like, what would happen if we embraced it? And what would happen if we embraced those around us who are in their own journeys and their own processes? It's like, it's what you say all the time. Who would we even be? Who could we even be as a humanity if we could make some more room for one another?
Who could our kids be and our loved ones be if we free them up to do the same thing? If what we're handing to our next generations or to those around us is liberation and freedom and becoming and growth and beauty and a tremendous victory of becoming more and returning more to who we've always been, that's what we want to hand down. That's what we want to give to others and share. That's that thing that feels most true about the world. To me, that's that thing maybe for you that is what you've always been pursuing from before anyone told you or handed you a box, right? Yeah. Like that feels like that gasp of air, in that temple square for me. And on that mountaintop. Yeah. And what if it didn't have to be so loaded? What if it didn't have to be eggshells and a fence? What if it could be just so freaking good and beautiful that we want to talk about all the time? Like, what if? What if it could be that gorgeous? Yeah. I think it is that gorgeous.
Yeah, we're finding that to be true.
I think, like Allison says, you've never been prettier. Like, you've never been prettier, Sarah, than when you're talking about being on that mountaintop and that gasp of fresh air.
Oh, I feel the same way about you in that temple. It's the liberation. Liberation is gorgeous. It's
liberation's hot.
Yeah, liberation's
never been prettier.
Let's make liberation hot.
let's make deconstruction hot again.
And on that note, and on
there's
that
our
note,
outtake.
We're out.
You've been listening to Spiritual Pyro with Sarah Carter and Corinne Shark on the 1C Story Network. For more information about this and all of our stories, please visit just1c.com. That's JUSTONEC.com.
That feels like a high five. Or like a weird dance. Okay, we're recording.
The 1C Story Network, for the love of stories.